It was a little after 2 in the morning when the people of Hopkinsville, Kentucky, woke to the sound of an army in their streets. Not soldiers. There was no war on. This was December of 1907 in a quiet tobacco town of 10,000 people. But there were rifles moving in the dark, and men on horseback, hundreds of them, faces hidden, riding in tight squads down the main streets as if they had drilled for exactly this. Because they had. They cut the telephone lines. They surrounded the police station and the firehouse and held them at gunpoint. And then, at the far end of town, the sky turned orange. By the time they rode back out, 2 of the largest tobacco warehouses in the city were burning to the ground, and the men who set the fire had melted back into the countryside they came from. Here is the part the people of Western Kentucky could never quite explain to outsiders. The masked men who captured Hopkinsville that night were not criminals from somewhere else. They were farmers, local farmers, and most of the town knew exactly who they were. Welcome back to Dark History of the Jackson Purchase. A while back we told you about the Nightriders of Callaway County and how the tobacco war finally reached one family's barn. Today, the whole war. How tobacco farmers across 2 states were pushed to the edge of ruin by a monopoly and answered by building a secret army that burned a corporation's property by the ton and took entire cities one at a time. This is the Black Patch War. To understand why, you have to understand what growing here actually took. This corner of Kentucky and Tennessee is called the Black Patch, named for a heavy, dark-fired tobacco that cures almost black in the smoke of a slow hardwood fire. It is some of the hardest farming there is. You set the plants by hand, work them all summer, cut and house them in the fall, and then you tend smoldering fires under them for weeks, day and night, so the smoke can do its slow work. A whole family gave a whole year to it. And for the people here, that one crop was everything. It was the mortgage, the winter coat, the doctor's bill, the difference between keeping the land and losing it. And around 1900, one man decided what all that work was worth. James Buchanan Duke had bought up his rivals until his American Tobacco Company controlled the market with almost no one left to bid against it. People here just called it the trust. In the Black Patch, the trust was usually the only buyer in the room, and it used that power to drive the price of dark tobacco down to 4, even 3 cents a pound. That was at or below what it cost a man just to grow it. Sit with what that meant. A man put his family through a full year of that brutal work, hauled the crop to the warehouse, and was handed a price that didn't cover his seed and his labor. He lost money on the best harvest he could raise. Some growers cleared about 30 cents a day, while the company setting that price was one of the richest in the country. And there was nowhere to turn. The trust owned the warehouses and the buyers. There was no other market to sell to, and no law yet that said any of this was wrong. You could do everything honest, work ground your grandfather cleared, and still lose it to the auction block. So in the fall of 1904, they tried the honest way first. In Guthrie, Kentucky, thousands of farmers gathered and formed the Planters Protective Association, led by a planter named Felix Ewing. The idea was simple and peaceful. If every grower held his tobacco back and refused to sell at robbery prices, the trust would have no choice but to raise its offer. Strength in numbers. Within a year, the association had something like 30,000 members. It should have worked. But it only worked if everyone held the line, and not everyone could. There were always farmers desperate enough, or just tempted enough, to break ranks and sell for a little quick cash. And everyone who did undercut the men holding out and handed the trust its power right back. To a family doing the hard, disciplined thing and still going under, a neighbor who sold out wasn't just a competitor. He was the reason the one peaceful plan they had was falling apart. So now these men were cornered from every side at once, robbed by the trust, betrayed by their own neighbors, ignored by the law. And that is where the mask comes in. Out of that desperation came a thing the association never openly admitted to. A country doctor from Caldwell County named David Amos helped organize a secret military wing. These were men who had decided that if no one would give them justice, they would take it in the dark, where no court could reach. They swore oaths. They drilled at night in the woods. They built it like a real army, with companies and captains and a chain of command that ran all the way up to the doctor himself. They called themselves the Silent Brigade. The newspapers gave them the name that stuck, the Nightriders. They began with warnings, and then with fire in the barns of men who sold to the trust. And then, on the first night of December 1906, they showed what they had really become. Around 200 masked riders swept into Princeton, Kentucky, seized the town, and burned 2 of the trust's warehouses, destroying some 75 tons of tobacco in a single night. This was not vandalism anymore. It was a military operation. And it built to the night we started with. December 7th, 1907, Hopkinsville. This time there were around 250 of them, and they ran it like a campaign. They rode in over the railroad tracks and split into 6 squads, each with an assignment. One group took the police. One seized the firehouse so that nothing they lit could be put out. Others cut the telegraph and telephone wires and captured the depot, sealing the whole town off from the outside world. For a few hours, a private army of farmers held a city of 10,000 people completely in its hands. Then they burned the trust's warehouses, fired their rifles into the office of the newspaper that had dared criticize them, and rode back out before the state could get a single man there to stop them. Nobody who saw it ever forgot it. Kentucky's new governor, Augustus Wilson, finally moved against them. The trouble was that the law could barely touch the Nightriders, because across much of the Black Patch, the law was the Nightriders. Sheriffs rode with them. Juries would not convict them. So Wilson sent in the state guard, put a $500 bounty on their heads, and made a promise that showed just how far things had gone. If you killed a Nightrider, and a jury somehow convicted you for it, he would pardon you. He was, in plain terms, declaring open season on the masked men. But the thing that finally broke the Nightriders was not the militia, and it was not the bounty. It was a courtroom. Local juries would never convict a neighbor, so the victims' lawyers found a way around them. They moved the injured families out of Kentucky, made them legal residents of another state, and that opened a door. It let them sue in federal court, down in Paducah, in front of a judge and jury the Nightriders did not own. The case that broke the dam belonged to a Caldwell County family named Hollowell. Robert and Mary Lou Hollowell had spoken out against the Riders, and one night the Riders came and beat them both. Their 11-year-old son, Price, watched it happen. And in that federal courtroom in Paducah, the boy stood up and testified against the men who did it, one of them his own uncle. The jury awarded the family $35,000 against 28 named Nightriders. $35,000 in 1900s money, and 28 names read aloud in open court. All at once, the mask was worth nothing. Other suits followed the same road to Paducah. The men who had captured whole cities could now be captured themselves, quietly, one lawsuit at a time. And the doctor? Amos, the man the state believed had built the entire Silent Brigade, was finally brought to trial in Hopkinsville in the spring of 1911. It took the jury about 40 minutes to find him not guilty. A state officer wrote to the governor afterward that the jury itself was made up of former Nightriders. The general walked out a free man, judged by his own army. That same year, the farmers won the bigger war almost by accident. The United States Supreme Court ruled that Duke's American Tobacco Company was an illegal monopoly and ordered it broken into pieces. The price of leaf came up. The reason to ride at night went away. In the end, the trust came down, and the farmers, in a rough and terrible way, had won. Almost none of the men were ever punished for the barns and the beatings. They took off their hoods, went back to their fields, and lived out their lives as respected citizens of these counties. Their descendants are still here, working the same land. So are the descendants of the people they burned out. That is the hard thing about local history. It did not happen far away, to strangers. It happened on the roads you drive every day, to families whose names are still in the phone book. This has been Dark History of the Jackson Purchase. Keep your porch light on.